to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. And today we're going to talk about the New Earth. Most of this is just a discussion I wanted to have. I'm recording this on December 21st, 2020, and have received hundreds of emails and seen numerous posts on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter about this exciting day, December 21st, where everything is going to change. And I've heard this before. It seems like almost every year there is some moment or event or thing that people believe it's going to happen now. We're going to have this sudden, massive shift and the whole planet will change. In my own belief, consciousness does not quite work like that, but I am completely fascinated by the New Earth. And it could work like that. I wanted to go over some different things we've talked about, including Drunvalo Melchizedek, Dolores Cannon, the law of one material. The New Earth is probably the most popular topic on my channel. If I put New Earth in the title, people are going to watch it, and I'm interested too. I want to know everything about this. The New Earth is completely fascinating, and it feels like there's something to it. We get our first impressions of the New Earth in the Bible. The New Earth is an expression used in the book of Isaiah 65:17 and 66:22, in 2 Peter 3:13, and the book of Revelation in the Bible to describe the final state of a redeemed humanity. It is one of the central doctrines of Christian eschatology and is referred to in the Nicene Creed as the world to come. We have references to it in the Neville Goddard material as the New Age. We're moving into these new bodies. So I wanted to kind of have an episode where we're going to talk about all of this. And I am warning you, I'm going to read some stuff from Drunvalo Melchizedek that is so frightening. When I posted it in my group, I had so many people panicking and freaking out that I removed it. So I'm going to read you this, but I want to read it to you with some explanation, and I'll let you judge what it means. But the 21st chapter of the book of Revelation introduces the final state of perfection, where, according to one commentator, cosmic time has been turned into eternity. In symbolic and visual language, God allows John to see the glory and beauty of the inheritance of his people. The first thing that you'll notice about this vision is that it includes a new heaven and a new earth. Many times I've heard references that the afterlife that we go to when we die is only temporary. All the souls are waiting for a new earth in which we will inhabit new bodies where we can live and create our realities instantaneously, where there is no problems or competitions, and some of the dualities that we go through are different. We're learning new lessons. The lessons go beyond some of the basic stuff that we're going through now. All of the stuff I'm talking about is just discussion. You must take this material and use it for what is best for you. If there's something in here that really bothers you, just ignore it. Let it go. Because we're going to talk about this. And so some people get triggered by this information. Some people have their own beliefs. Obviously this really started back in 2012. And in the law of one material, which is channeled in the 80s, they were referring to 2012. And the Mayan calendar supposedly referred to 2012 as this key point. And it's amazing the number of coincidences that we see in a number of channeled works, including some of the QHHT sessions that Dolores Cannon had, where she spoke with higher dimensional entities talking about this huge transition. You can see it in a number of works, including Urantia and Awaspe. There is a cycle to the universe, and we're in this sort of cycle, and it sort of appeals to the idea in me of what are we doing here? What is the earth all about? What's our goals here? I think the new earth is a part of that discussion. So the basic difference with the promises of the Old Testament and the New Testament is that in the Revelation, they have a sort of ontological value. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. So you can take some different interpretations of what that means. In Koine Greek, there are two words that are translated as new in the English Bible, neos and kainos. One Greek resource states, as distinct from neos, new in time, kainos means new in nature. Both words suggest unfamiliar, unexpected, wonderful, and the distinction fades with time. So the biblical references are not necessarily important, but it's obviously been a part of spirituality for a very long time. What does this mean, and what happens to the earth through this discussion? Well, for the past decade, as we've seen, New Age spiritualists and channeled beings have been talking about the planet transitioning or ascending from third dimension to fourth or fifth dimension. And in the Law of One material, they refer to transitioning from the third density to the fourth or fifth density. It is as if each year is the year. This is the day that this ascension was supposed to happen. A lot of people have this vision that it's going to happen suddenly. But the new earth that was envisioned never quite materialized in 2012. Or did it? When we look at the Mandela effect, did a lot of that come up after 2012? Did we shift to a parallel reality? When we look in a scientific laboratory at a cell, and when the cell duplicates, it goes through a process of mitosis, and then the cell replicates itself. And the earth is very much like a living being, like a cell, and it could be replicating itself. And people in the third density may not be aware of it. That's one kind of sort of model that people use in understanding it. So in 2020, by the time you're listening to this, it's probably 2021, the dramatic worldwide impact of COVID has increased many people's conviction that a transition is taking place now, more than any other time before. And maybe they're right. Some people still hold to the belief, more common in the past than today, that the earth will shift suddenly and completely from being a third dimensional planet to being a fourth or fifth dimensional planet. I believe that those with that type of expectation are usually disappointed. If you had that belief in December 21st, as of the time I'm at least giving this, it hasn't happened yet. But I do feel some energies, I don't know. Others frame it in a more nuanced manner by emphasizing that we third dimensional earth humans are learning, using, and applying more and more fourth and fifth dimensional skills and perceptions in our lives, that the change is an internal one, a movement from the solar plexus to the heart. And it's a change from the internal selfish aspect to an external non-selfish aspect. Maybe on December 21st, by the time the day is done, there will be a tipping point. Maybe this is a tipping point in which these skills will be considered normal, and that will be the new earth. Fourth dimensional consciousness skills, according to many of the materials, include using our intuition and creativity, practicing forms of meditation and yoga, lucid dreaming and out-of-body experience techniques, channeling, and other ways of communicating with higher dimensional beings and ETs through Dr. Greer's work in the Law of One material, and working with past life regression with QHHT, Dolores Cannon, hypnosis, and psychic abilities. These modalities bring you into the fourth dimensions and the fifth dimensions, and bring those dimensions into the third dimension. So this may be different from the concept of enlightenment, which is more about experiencing, knowing the oneness, perfection, and unconditional love of all existence. Enlightenment characteristics are typically associated with what we hear of descriptions in the fifth dimension. What are the spiritual dimensions? We can think of waking reality and our dreaming reality as examples of two different dimensions. When you go to sleep and you dream, that is a different dimension that pretty much all humans experience. That's one way to relate to this. In fact, there are potentially an infinite number of spiritual dimensions, each of which has different rules about what can and cannot be done. In comparison to our third dimension Earth, most higher dimensions, also called lighter densities or heavier densities, depending on which model you're looking at, are characterized as having less stress and suffering, more harmony and cooperation, less egocentric behavior and exploitation, more wisdom and understanding, less separation and othering, and more oneness and love. In my interview with Jim McCarty, he explained this transition as the Akashic record becoming conscious and a social memory complex, which is sort of a group mind forming, utilizing all of the individual forms of consciousness into a sort of whole, meaning we'll be able to read other people's minds or sense within this oneness that everyone is us. And in this process, we see all of the secrets revealed, and we become much more sensitive to things that happen around us. When you see injustices happen, in the past, they're just something that happened on TV, but now when an injustice happens, it feels like it's happening to you. This is sort of one description of how the new earth may be. Remember, I am just trying to ponder everything that we know from the literature that I've done through several different episodes. Detailed definitions of the different spiritual dimensions vary considerably, but there are similarities at general levels. One approach associates the dimensions with the 7 chakras in the physical body. Our third dimensional earth is where the third chakra is dominant in the consciousness of most humans, as described by Ra in the Law of One Material. This makes sense, as the third chakra emphasizes how we express personal power, individualism, and control in our physical world. And a fourth dimensional earth would find most humans having a fourth chakra consciousness, which is based in the heart and carries an energy of love, harmony, cooperation, community, and relationships. And a fifth dimensional earth would be one where humans have a fifth chakra or throat consciousness, which includes mastery of consciously creating your own reality to live a life that you truly love. Another perspective sees the third dimension as when most humans identified solely with their physical body and were asleep to their spiritual being. The fourth dimension was when most woke up to identify with their spiritual consciousness or soul, beyond their physical body. Similar to the throat chakra perspective, the fifth dimension is reached when humans start to create their physical reality from their larger consciousness, like God. The reason the fifth dimension tends to be emphasized much more than fourth in many New Age spiritual circles is because some, not all, writings characterize the fourth dimension as a realm of lower vibration astral beings. In this model, the fifth dimension has higher vibrational beings who operate from unconditional love and oneness, which is often likened to heaven or earth, or a lucid dream in which you have complete control to create anything that you want. In the Law of One Material and discussion, they talk about you inhabiting in a completely new body in which the whole process of eating is different. In the Neville Goddard material, there is a discussion. There's no need to eat anymore, and you don't have to go to the bathroom anymore. That in one particular lecture, there's a discussion of dreams people had that he has seen in visions that Neville Goddard had, where people still miss the joy of eating, so they go and sort of have an experience. They run a card and they go and have the experience of eating pizza without actually eating the pizza. That is just one example of the many different stories that we've heard. So the question is, are we moving to heaven? Is this the heavenly state or just a different way of living? In the Law of One Material, they indicate that as the earth moves in space, it moves into an area of space where there is more dense light, and the light and electrons are different than before. They literally work at different angles according to the Quo material. And it is a state of consciousness or existence that requires us going through the third density for a period of time. And that the third density is sort of an illusory existence that's like a school that sets us up for the fourth density. Many channel entities indicate it's when we become accepted into the galactic community as a planet and as an existence. And one of the reasons for the Fermi paradox is that most intelligent civilizations exist in a different density, and moving into that density, we become aware of this. And there's a lot of discussion of the ascension ascending from third density to fourth density. So the transition or ascension to the fourth or fifth density, according to the raw material, may have started in World War II. And perhaps with the invention and the use of the atomic bomb, higher dimensional beings, including extraterrestrials, spirit guides, angels, are said to have started to make much more interest in our planet at that time. Others point to the music and the protest movements of the 60s as the start of the planet's transition to a higher dimension. Of course, there's all kinds of astrological information, the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces, and the age of Aquarius, which some say officially started in July of 2020, whereas others say it will start on December 21st. This transition was highlighted with the song Aquarius from the 1967 musical Hair. The end of the Mayan calendar on December 21st, 2012 is pointed to as a milestone in the planet's ascension of the denser third dimension. Evidence of the transformation in recent decades is seen in the tremendous growth in the world in yoga and meditation, wellness. If you watch TV and you follow the news, you'll see that people are responding to news events with much more intensity. It is much more personal to them than in the past. And this may be because of a greater awareness that is brought about by density and light. That is certainly one supposition that's been given. Much of the explosion in these areas of meditation and wellness and yoga has been enhanced by the globalization of the internet. For example, much of the information in this discussion on this podcast is based on messages from different higher dimensional channeled beings communicating through different human channelers. The practice of channeling alone has become normal and commonplace to a degree unthinkable a decade or two ago. We even get mentions of New Earth from Christian Larson in the New Thought material. Check out the episode from Charles Brody Patterson on the fourth dimension in the New Earth, or the discussion of Sal Rochelle's channelings from the founders on the New Earth. All of that stuff is amazing and very interesting regarding this transition. There has to be something when so many different channelings are talking about this. Really, we have no choice but to ascend. That's what we're doing every day. We're learning and we're changing from our environment, what we learn. Most are totally unaware that this is happening to them. For some, the ascension is easy, highly welcome, because they are already comfortable with fourth and fifth dimension. Others are clinging hard to third dimensional identities and are having a much harder time with this transition due to fake news, teachings which are focused on incorrect aspects of this transition. It's interesting when you look at some of the conspiracy theories, a lot of them have used this understanding of the New Earth and the change into the Great Awakening, and they've almost tried to hijack it without any semblance of connection to what the New Earth actually is. Those of us alive today most likely chose to be born at this time. That's what I believe, specifically to experience and help with this particular transition. I have an episode on starseeds where we talk about there are numerous reincarnated entities that have come to the earth because we're going through this transition. Perhaps many people have used the COVID-19 pandemic to leave the planet at this time because they had no intention to experience a fourth dimension or fifth dimensional earth in this incarnation. Some say the people on Earth have mostly had a third dimensional consciousness for 5,000 to 10,000 years since the Bronze Age. Throughout that time, however, there have always been people who had developed fourth, fifth, or higher dimensional states of consciousness, such as saints and seers and mystics and spiritual teachers. It's implied in the Dolores Cannon material and the Law of One material that you can move into this fourth or fifth dimension without the Earth's transition. It's just happening on a wider scale through the Earth's movement into higher energies. The coming transition is basically being driven by a significant rise at this time in the number of people on the planet who have developed their fourth and fifth dimensional consciousness. That may be the number one reason. Nothing else. The earth is not changed. We are just changing as human beings. And the internet perhaps has helped in that way, in finding greater connections. You may be simply aware at some level that that is what is going on. And it's difficult to talk about with your friends and family that think that you're crazy when you talk about this stuff. And so from a New Age spiritual perspective, the COVID-19 pandemic could have been brought about to help us move to a higher dimension, to prepare us. The earth decided now was the time to make a dramatic move in that direction. People have had more time to be at home, to be alone, to go within, to expand their consciousness. It's being perceived and managed in certain ways that it's helping mankind to better discern what they want and what they do not want in their life. It is forcing a planet-wide calming and re-examination of personal and social values. That may be what's going on. Some people even make the argument that the widespread use of masks is pushing us to become more able to telepathically communicate, something that most planets do, that supposedly some channeled entities will say that we're a very small percentage of planets that actually speak to communicate, and this will open up our ability to become more telepathic. So how will we ascend? That's the real question. What's going to happen? A few see humanity splitting, with some staying on the third dimensional version of Earth, while others physically move to a new fifth dimensional version. In the Dolores Cannon material, they say that you can see the other planet. It's implied that it's obvious that it's happening. And you choose which planet you go on through daily choices. And when embracing fear, which is a third dimensional property, it pulls you towards the old Earth. When you move towards decisions that override that fear-based thinking into love, thinking of others beyond yourself, you make decisions that move you towards the new Earth. And slowly over time, over a set of number of decisions, you move into the new Earth consciousness. And that's how it naturally happens. They say that this new Earth is hidden from our current view on the opposite side of the sun, some say. I do not find that convincing. Most say that at some point, which is difficult to predict, we will be reconnected with intelligent beings on other planets in our solar system and galaxy who mostly communicate and travel using fourth and higher dimensional technologies. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of tension, a lot of contradictions for what different people say is going to happen. Perhaps it's just going to be a big culture shock. Who knows? As the Earth is expanding to a higher dimension, so is the entire universe on all dimensions transitioning to a lighter density. This is being felt in similar ways by beings in all dimensions, so we may not be alone. Some channeled beings say that the model for a new Earth is based on what has been developed on planets around the star Sirius. Sirian human-like races have third-dimensional physical bodies but travel and communicate across the galaxy using fourth and fifth-dimensional technologies. Who knows? So ascension might be integration of some level. There's so many different things to say. I get a lot of notes from people that are afraid, that say, oh no, I think the new Earth has already been created and it's too late for us. And I don't believe that. According to the law of one material and the Neville Goddard material, it would seem to indicate that you move to the next level after death. And so that's the real question of, do we happen to go to a new Earth while we're alive, conscious in this body, or does it happen upon death? According to the law of one material, you will move to the new Earth if you are service to others 51% of the time for your whole life. And then the Earth is transitioned to this sort of fourth density that has a social memory complex that's focused upon that percentage. If you believe the law of one material, the Dolores Cannon will say our bodies and everything around us are in this increasing vibratory rate, and adjusting to new frequencies. And so every cell of the body begins to vibrate at such a fast rate. Eventually it turns into light. And the temperature of the body increases and the body starts to glow with light. When every cell is vibrating at a very high rate, you disappear from normal vision and move into higher dimensional reality. This is implied in the law of one material, that the fourth dimensional beings cannot see the third dimensional beings. This is because the body is moved into a vibration beyond the third dimension. It's vibrating on a higher dimensional level. And this means that you will not go through a death process as you will when you have a light body. Aging will not exist for you, and you will have stepped into a next dimensional reality. Many of these channeled beings have emphasized that this has happened down through time to certain individuals and small groups of people. But what makes it unique now is that it will be the first time that an entire planet will make the shift into another dimension, according to the Dolores Cannon material. This will be the new earth and the new world described in the Bible. The others who are not ready will be left behind to continue to live out their karma. According to the law of one material, those left behind are simply reincarnated into third dimensional, third density planets elsewhere in the galaxy. So that's always a possibility of what's happening. It's just a part of the process of reincarnation. Others who are not ready will be left behind, and those who have not become enlightened will have to return to another denser planet that is still involved with negativity. So there are lots of different bits of information that we've been receiving about this, especially on the podcast. So when I look at the Neville Goddard information, he's always referring to the New Age. Neville Goddard says, we're being prepared to enter a new age altogether where we don't need the relationship of male-female. It's a brotherhood where we create out of our own wonderful imagination. Everything is subject to our imaginative power. We don't need the divided image of male-female. We are a man, and man is not a male, and man is not a female, because man is God. That's one interpretation that he says. In another, he says, and it's a portion of resurrection, and it begins the new age. You become resurrected to this new Christ consciousness. A completely different age begins, he says, with the resurrection of Jesus Christ in the individual. It does not begin with the birth. The birth is the other side of the coin. It begins with the resurrection. No one has the birth prior to resurrection. The resurrection begins Christianity. It begins on that note. In another lecture, he says, when your world, this age, has ceased to be and you enter on a new age, an entirely different world. Well, how am I clothed for that world? And listen to the words carefully from the 3rd chapter of Philippians, speaking now of the cosmic Son, Jesus Christ. He will change our lower body. And the word change literally means refashion. He will change our lowly body to be like his. The phrase to be like his literally means of one form with. That's what it means. To be like his literally means of one form with his glorious body. So your future body is actually that of the radiant, exalted Christ, not another. One body, one being for God the Father, God the Son, according to Neville Goddard. Now in other works, it is much more frightening and different. There is a discussion that a preparation for this fourth density was made with the Great Pyramid, that there is a hall in the Great Pyramid, according to Drunvalo Melchizedek, that captures these fourth density, fourth dimensional energies. And you had to become an apprentice and train so that you, when you went into this room, that you could survive it, because whatever you thought of would become real. So as soon as you start seeing spiders, they show up. So there's always a possibility there's some truth to this dimensional shift. So most of the prophets and indigenous peoples of the world see a great change coming to Earth, to humankind. We have that agreed. We've talked about it from multiple perspectives. They see this change ultimately and specifically as a planetary dimensional shift into a new level of existence associated with a change of consciousness. So let's look a little bit closer at this. A dimensional shift is when a planet or any cosmic body moves from one dimensional level into another. In our case, it will be from third to fourth dimension. The whole planet and everyone on it will experience this translation from one dimension to another. The Native Americans believe that we're about to move from the fourth world into the fifth world, a change preceded by a day they call the Day of Purification. The difference in the numbers is because they see the void as a world and begin counting from that point. So the third dimension of the Melchizedeks and the fourth world of the Native Americans are the same. And if you choose, you can understand the nature of this transformation as a transition into the next dimensional level or next world. Even though it's probably going to be a very quick transformation according to Melchizedek, we can see the nature of it and understand what the changes are that we must enter. It lifts the veil of the events of this world and explains why they are happening. It allows for a clarity of mind and heart about this transformation as we discuss it. According to Melchizedek, on planets in this galaxy, normally the geomagnetic fields first begin to weaken and then become erratic. The civilization on the planet begins to break down, and finally the last phase is entered. The final phase lasts usually no more than 2 years, but nearly always at least 3 months. In this phase, the civilization begins to dissolve, and it becomes extremely dangerous just to be alive. All the systems that keep civilization in place disintegrate, and chaos rules. This is the period that most religions, such as the Mormon religion, have prepared for. It is the period we are still on Earth in the third dimension before we actually make the transition into the fourth. Then there's a period of 5 or 6 hours, according to Melchizedek, before the dimensional shift begins. It's a very strange time when the fourth dimension begins to leak into the third dimension. It really helps to know that this is coming. When the shift actually begins, there will be no doubt there are specific changes of color and form that are outside of human consciousness. From this point forward, we have left the Earth's third dimension. Usually the axis of the planet will shift, but we will not know it because we literally will be in a new space-time dimension. There are always other possibilities for how this might happen, but this is the normal course. Passing through the void, we will enter into the Earth's fourth dimension. Life will be altered dramatically. Ascension, resurrection, and final death will take place before this phase. Birth into the new world will have begun. The following scenario details the way a dimensional shift generally happens in the universe, but Earth is an exceptional case, and Melchizedek talks about a normal transition as though it will happen, but our own transition could and almost certainly will lead to something more anomalous. The course of history may turn into something very different from what he is describing. The first sign of a planetary dimensional shift is a sharp weakening of the geomagnetic field, which science knows has been dropping on Earth for the last 2,000 years, since Jesus appeared. In the last 500 years, the Earth's geomagnetic field has been dropping more dramatically. As we approach the dimensional shift, the geomagnetic field will begin to go crazy, which has already happened. The world's airports have had to alter magnetic error corrections for north for their airport maps in order to use automatic instruments. The last 30 years have seen very peculiar magnetic field changes. The birds are not migrating to their usual locations. Birds use magnetic lines to navigate their migratory routes home, and these lines have changed dramatically. Melchizedek believes that this is causing the whales and dolphins to beach themselves because they too use these lines to migrate. Many magnetic lines that have always followed the coast have now moved inland. As the cetaceans follow them, they run into land and are beached. Eventually, the geomagnetic field will probably collapse and fall to zero. It has happened many times in Earth's history. If this happens, several scenarios might take place. The field could reverse itself and the poles could switch, or it might return to the same polar configuration after it reaches zero with a completely different axis. There are various ways it could move, but it doesn't really matter to your ascension. You will not be here on this level of Earth's dimension, so you won't have a direct experience of this change. There are other more subtle energy changes such as the Schumann frequency, the basic resonant frequency of planet Earth, which will change before the dimensional shift occurs. But the geomagnetic change is the biggest. And it's difficult to talk about the Schumann frequency, and there's a lot of different information on it. Studies by Germany and Russia, so I could certainly go into a whole other lecture on that. The importance of the geomagnetic field lies in the effect it has on the human mind, when and if it moves to zero and stays there for more than about 2 weeks. According to the Russians, in the early days, when they put people into space, and they were mostly out of the Earth's geomagnetic field for more than 2 weeks, their cosmonauts literally went crazy. This is exactly what happened after the fall when Atlantis sank, according to Melchizedek. People lost their memories and went nuts. It seems the Earth's magnetism holds our memories intact, much like a cassette tape, and this is tied to our emotional bodies. So the Russians invented a small appliance to be worn on a belt that cosmonauts wear to maintain a normal geomagnetic field around the body when in space. It may seem strange that geomagnetics would affect our emotions, but just think what happens during a full moon. The full moon makes only slight changes in the geomagnetics, but the effect is obvious. In any major city in the world, check out the police records on the day before, the day of, and the day after the full moon. There are more murders, rapes, and general crimes on those 3 days than any other time. However, when the geomagnetic field moves to zero, it becomes a much greater problem. Even the fluctuations of the world's stock market are based on human emotions, so you can see how major fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic fields last for longer than 2 weeks can cause havoc in the world. There's a phase before the shift, according to Melchizedek. This is the period that usually lasts for 3 months to 2 years. It's triggered mostly by the geomagnetics driving people crazy. This is what causes the collapse of the social systems of the world. The stock market crashes. The governments become non-functional and martial law is invoked, but doesn't work because the military is having the same problem. This is followed by the lack of food and other supplies and no help. On top of this, most people become paranoid and reach for their guns. There is nowhere safe on Earth's surface. However, because of the tremendous help that our spiritual ET brothers have given us, Melchizedek says, and because of the dramatic changes in consciousness that we have accomplished ourselves, there's an excellent chance that we will not go through this dangerous period. And if we do, it will be very quick. So the work we're doing in meditation and consciousness may alleviate some of the problems during that shift. If we were to prepare for this phase on a physical level, we would put food and supplies in a hole in the ground to last at least 2 years. However, if we entered this underground fort when the shift began, we would not come out, because the dimensional shift will take us into a new dimension of the Earth's consciousness, a place where the third dimension, our normal world, will not exist. Once the shift begins, the third dimensional world will pass away, so it's unfeasible to put food and supplies in a hole and expect to emerge after everything is over and resume life as usual. A large portion of our population did this in anticipation of the Y2K problem, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it may not be the best solution. Then 5 to 6 hours before the shift, Melchizedek says this phase is a weird one. From a human point of view, the Native Americans in the tribe he was first born to, when arrived on Earth, the Daos Pueblo, are told to enter the Pueblo, pull the curtains, not look outside, and pray. To look outside would only cause fear, which is the last thing you need. A strange phenomenon begins at this stage. The two dimensions begin to overlap. You may be sitting in your room when suddenly something appears out of nowhere that will not be explainable to your mind. It will be a fourth dimensional object that will not fit into your understanding of reality. You will see colors that you have never seen before in your life. These colors will be exceedingly bright and will seem to have their own light source. The color will seem to be emitted rather than reflected, and they have a shape your mind will not be able to explain. These objects will be the strangest things you have ever seen. It's a natural phenomenon. So the strong suggestion is that you don't touch one of these objects. And if you do, it will instantly pull you into the fourth dimension at an accelerated rate. It would be easiest and best if you avoid moving that fast. If it is unavoidable, then it is the will of God. The other phenomenon that will occur, most certainly, has to do with the nature of reality and the way we live in it. The original reality is created in such a way that everything is in divine order with everything else. But in our current reality, technology has made synthetic materials. These materials, which are not found in nature, will not be able to pass into the fourth dimension. They will return into the elements that were created. It is possible to send a synthetic material into the next dimension, but it requires a special energy field to keep it intact. And further, these synthetic materials have a spectrum of stability. Some of them, like glass, are not far removed from nature. Glass is just melted sand, but other materials are far removed. This means that some synthetic objects, depending on their stability, will melt or disintegrate quicker than others during this 5 to 6 hour period. Your car is made of plastics and other highly unstable materials, so it will definitely be unserviceable. So you imagine the whole world not being able to drive their cars. Even your house is probably made up of many unstable materials and will, for the most part, break down and partly disintegrate. Knowing this time would happen, when it did, the Taos Pueblo long made it legal to use modern building materials inside the Pueblo. The Taos people do make summer homes of synthetic materials away from the Pueblo, but they know that when the day of purification comes, they are to head for their ancient homes on the Pueblo. Sometimes they put windows in their Pueblo buildings, but because the openings didn't have glass before, if they lose a window, it won't be a big loss. Therefore, it would be best to be in nature when this happens. But if you cannot, then that is the will of God. Don't worry about it. And in human terms, a person thinks of something, imagines it, then figures out how to do it. People create in one way or another and manifest the object on the earth. It can be an individual or a group of people, it doesn't matter. The person who creates it does not hold the objects here on the earth plane, even if the person created it. It's held in a place by our third dimensional human grid around the planet. That's the consciousness grid of all the people on this level. It's an agreed reality held in place by the grid. So if someone dies who created an object, the object remains. But if the grid that holds these objects were to break down, the object would turn into materials it came from, leaving no trace. That's why, in many ways, according to Melchizedek, when we look back, we've had all these major civilizations. Why is there no signs of them? It's because they had synthetic materials that broke down through different shifts in our past. Obviously, the people who are going crazy because of the collapse of the geometric field will become much worse when they see this reality collapsing, when objects begin to disappear or disintegrate. According to Edgar Cayce and other psychics, there have been many advanced civilizations on the earth before, which is mind-boggling for me to think about. There have been cities like New York and Los Angeles sprawled across the land somewhere that we do not know about. Think about that. There have been airplanes flying around Earth millions of years ago. We don't know about that because, according to Melchizedek, all remnants would disappear because the energies that come in allow these things to dissolve quickly. According to Melchizedek, every person who has ever lived on Earth has already experienced the shift they had to in order to get here on Earth. It's just a cosmic fact. Unless we came from close by, wherever we came from before we came to Earth, we had to have passed through the void to get here. So we had to change dimensions. On the day you were born in Earth as a baby, you experienced a dimensional shift. You moved from one world into another. It's only because of our poor human memory that we don't remember. By not remembering the experience of being born of other dimensions, we have placed enormous limitations on ourselves. For one, we can't overcome the reality of great distance. The distances in our reality are so great we can't cross them. We can't even leave our solar system, for in this present state of awareness, we are prisoners in our own home. Is it not true? Traveling great distances by spaceship in the conventional way of perceiving time and space is not possible. Scientific minds have come to the conclusion that it would take 115 million years using current space technology for us to travel 4 light years to Alpha Centauri, the closest star. Humans do not live that long, and besides, that is only the closest star. To reach deep into space would simply be impossible. Our problem is that we know about only time and space. The reality of dimension has been mostly lost because all things are perfect. We are remembering now, just when we need to. We are remembering in our dreams, then in our movies like Star Trek, Contact, and Sphere, and many others are exploring ideas about dimensions. We will remember, for God is with us. What Melchizedek says in his book, which you completely don't have to believe in it. I don't know if I believe in it as well. He says that this is what you'd find in a galactic textbook. It's a normal scenario that's happened millions of times. There can be many different details because life is flexible, but knowing the norm, you can imagine the differences. As we enter this new age, the ascended masters feel there will be very little violence approaching this shift, for we have come a long way on the path. We've done a great job in helping to birth the new human consciousness. So Melchizedek says to relax and Don't worry. Enjoy the transition. As you witness the perfection of life, you can be that little baby you may have wanted to revert back to. So then he talks about 6 hours before the shift, and you wake up on a cool, clear morning feeling great. You stand up, you realize you're feeling very light and a little strange. You decide to take a bath, and you're watching the water, and you sense something behind you, and you turn and see a large, bright, glowing object of strange colors floating 3 feet off the floor. And as you try to figure this out, a smaller one appears out of nowhere, a few feet away. You jump and run into the bedroom, only to see the whole room filled with these strange, unimaginable things. Or you see divas. Check out my episode on divas, which are apparently something that you can see when you're in the fourth density or fourth dimension. Suddenly the floor begins to break apart and the whole house begins to distort. You run outside into nature and everything seems normal, but there's these strange things everywhere. You decide to sit down and not move. You remember your Merkaba and begin to breathe with awareness, which is what Melchizedek says to do. The problem is, once you've entered into this, then your thoughts become things much faster and faster as we are in this sort of quickening process as we move towards this density. There's something that's mentioned here as the 3 days of blackness that is referred to by other textbooks and writings, and that's when metal begins to dim and fade away, and bright gold begins to dull, and a blackness engulfs you, and your world is gone forever. You can't see anything, not even your body. You realize that you are stable, but at the same time you seem to be floating. Your familiar world is gone. He says not to feel fear. You've entered the void between the third and fourth dimension, and the void that all things came from and must always pass back into. To be concise, this period may last from 2.25 days to about 4 days. And these days are Earth days, of course. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something that is mentioned by him and others. And the next experience is rather shocking. After floating in nothing and blackness for 3 days, on one level of your being, it may seem like thousands of years has gone by. Then totally unexpected, in an instant, your entire world will explode with a brilliant white light. It will be blinding. It will be the brightest light you've ever known, and it will take a long time before your eyes can adjust and handle the intensity of this new light. More than likely, the experience will seem brand new, and you have just become a baby in a new reality. You're a little baby, just like when you were born on Earth. You came from a very dark place into a very light place. You were somewhat blinded and didn't know what the heck was going on. When you start adjusting to this intensity of light, which might take a while, you'll begin to see colors you've never seen and never knew existed. Everything, the whole configuration, the whole experience will be bizarre and unknown to you. In truth, it is more of a second birth. On Earth, when you are born, you begin small and continue to grow until you are an adult. We usually think of human adulthood as the end of growth. You may seem strange or sound strange until you see that it is a human adult body in the next world is a baby. Exactly as happens here. You begin to grow and get taller until you reach adulthood in this new world. Adulthood in this new fourth dimensional world, according to Melchizedek, is taller than here. An adult male is 14 to 16 feet tall. An adult female is about 10 to 12 feet. Your body will seem solid just as on Earth, but compared to third dimensional Earth, it isn't. In fact, if you were to go back to Earth, no one could see you. You still have an atomic structure, but the atoms will have mostly converted into energy. You become a great deal of energy and very little matter. You can walk right through a solid wall on Earth, but here you are solid. This new birth will be your last life in a structure as you know it. In the fifth dimension, which will be coming soon after the fourth, there are no life forms. It is a formless state of consciousness. You will have no body, but you will be everywhere at once. Now, these are the things that Melchizedek says. Dolores Cannon says something different. The Law of One says something different. I'm trying to put these into context. He explains that time is extremely different in the fourth dimension. A few minutes on Earth is several hours in fourth dimension. So what will seem like to you 2 years, you will reach an adulthood. But simply growing up is not what life is all about, just as here on Earth. There are levels of knowledge and existence that would be hard to imagine from where you will be when you first enter the fourth dimension. Just as a baby here on Earth could not comprehend astrophysics. And so you're a baby in this new world, yet you are far from helpless. You're a powerful spirit. You can control the entire reality with your thoughts. Whatever you think happens instantly. At first, you normally don't recognize this connection. Most people don't put the two and two together for several days, and those few days are crucial according to Melchizedek. They could keep you from surviving in this new world if you don't understand. Here, you are only a few minutes old, and the first big test in life begins when the fourth dimensional window is opened. Anyone can go through, but generally not everyone can stay. What they found is that there are three types of people at this stage. First, there are people who pass over who are ready. They have prepared themselves in this life by the life they lived. Then there are people who aren't ready, who are filled with so much fear, they cannot allow themselves to leave this third dimension past the void, and they immediately return to Earth. Finally, there's a third group that passes over, but isn't really quite ready for this experience. They were ready enough to transition into fourth dimension, but they weren't prepared to stay. Jesus spoke of these people when he said at the end of a parable, "For many are called, but few are chosen." There was another parable about a wheat farmer whose servants reported that many weeds were growing in his wheat fields, and they asked what to do. The farmer told them to let the weeds grow with the wheat, and when it was harvest time, to gather them both up and then to separate the chaff from the wheat. A farmer would normally attempt to get rid of the weeds before they got big, but that's not what he said to do. What Jesus was referring to is the two different kinds of people, the ones who are ready and the ones who aren't. When people are not quite ready, it means they are bringing all their fears and hatred with them. When they find themselves in this very bizarre world, all their fears and anger arise because they don't know whatever they think will take shape around them. Their fears begin to manifest because they don't understand what is happening. In the beginning, most people reproduce familiar images of this old world, things they can recognize. They do this to make sense of what is happening. They're not doing this consciously, but from survival instincts, and they start creating the old images and emotional patterns. But this new world is so bizarre that all their fears come up. They say, "Holy cow, what's going on? This is crazy, it's insane." They see people who have died long ago. They might begin to see scenes from their past, even their childhoods. Nothing makes sense. The mind searches for some way to create order. They think they're hallucinating, and this brings up more fear. Thinking in their earthly way, they might feel that something is happening or someone is doing this to them, so they need to protect themselves. The ego thinks it needs a gun. Manifestation follows thought, and when they look down, there's a rifle with a scope, just where they want it. They pick up the gun and think, "I need ammunition." And they look to the left, and there are some huge boxes of it, and they load up and begin looking for bad guys who they think are trying to kill them. So who instantly appears? The bad guys fully armed. Now their worst fears start manifesting, whatever they are, so they start shooting everywhere they turn. Other people are trying to kill them. Finally, their biggest fear manifests, and they're fatally shot. A scenario of some sort will happen that will remove them from this higher world back to the world from which they came. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "For all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword." But Jesus also said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Which means if you're sitting in this new world thinking simple thoughts of love, harmony, and peace, trusting in God and yourself, then that is exactly what will manifest in your world. You will manifest a harmonious, beautiful world. If you're meek, you allow yourself to remain in this higher world by your thoughts, feelings, and actions. You survive. And that's just the beginning, of course. You are born into a new world and you survive. From this point on, there are infinite possibilities. One that will invariably occur is that after a while, you'll start to explore this reality, and at one point, you'll start to realize whatever you think happens. And at this point, people often look down at their bodies and say, "Wow," and with their thoughts perfect their bodies and physically become what they always wanted to be. They will heal everything, grow back arms and legs. Why not? It's like a toy to a child, because ego often still functions a little bit at this stage. You might make yourself really beautiful or handsome or taller, but you will soon get bored with perfecting your body. You will begin to explore the rest of your new reality. One thing will almost certainly happen. You'll suddenly notice large moving lights around the area you're in. They're called mother and father. Yes, you will have parents in the fourth dimension. It is, however, the last time, for in the next higher world you will not. In the area of the fourth dimension where you arrive, the family problems we have experienced here on Earth don't exist. Your mother and father there will love you in ways you probably have only dreamed of on earth. They will completely love and take care of you. They will not allow anything to happen to you in a bad way once you have survived. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. It is a time of tremendous joy if you simply surrender and allow this love to guide you. You may realize that you've just won the biggest game of life, and all the pain and suffering you've experienced in life is over. Another beautiful and sacred level of life is emerging. Now the purpose and meaning of life begins to return consciously. You begin to experience another ancient yet new way of being, and it's yours. It has always been yours, but you gave it up. So now you are returning to the state of awareness where God is apparent in all of life. He is apparent with every breath that enters your shining body of light. So the thing that's talked about a lot in the Law of One material is the veiling in the third density. When we move to the new earth, there is not the veil, meaning you will have a memory of all your reincarnations. You will be aware of God's presence. There will not be a question about it. You will not have that veiling and mystery that is part of the dimension that we're in. So much of this might not be true, but it seems like from all of the different channelings and writings, something of its essence may be true on some level. So how do we prepare for this? I would definitely say that we continue to work on creating our reality and focus on the way we think. That's why I think it's so important. You need to know the power of your thoughts. And right now, they are getting more powerful as we move towards this. So I don't believe, with my own understanding of nature, that it will happen like this. In the Sal Rochelle material, he says there is not the 3 days of darkness that Drunvalo Melchizedek says. He says this is entirely false. We are not sure how this prophecy got started, but we do know that it arises from a misinterpretation of a translated ancient prophecy that pertains to the partial collapse of the electromagnetic polarities at the poles of the Earth. First of all, Sal Rochelle says in his book Earth Awakens Prophecy 2012 to 2030 that this violates the laws of physics in the lower four dimensions. The Newtonian laws are quite real and have an overriding impact on physical objects, including all rotational and revolving motion of planets and stars within the lower four dimensions of the galaxy. That said, the only way the Earth would experience 3 days of darkness would be if there was a nuclear war, if virtually all the volcanoes went off, or the Earth collides with another large object. And the erroneous translation that gave rise to this prophecy goes something in the Mayan writings that there is going to be neither night or day for 3 days. Prophets are referring to the electromagnetic null zone and the partial collapse of the polarities of the EM field on Earth during the portal openings in the galactic shift, Rochelle says. A situation of neutral polarities opens up a portal. So there's obviously going to be some truth and there's going to be some lies in some of the stuff that we've discussed. But a lot of these people are claiming it's absolute truth, and it can be frustrating when you're looking at it that way. So it's hard to tell what's really happening. Or is anything happening? Is this just all a fever dream that sort of just snowballs because so many different people started talking about it? And really, it's nothing. Who knows if that's what's going on? Clearly, there can be levels of consciousness. If you just consider how limited we are in our consciousness, we only have 5 senses. So we can detect energy with 5 different senses. And we may have access to new bodies that have more detailed abilities to access energies in multiple senses beyond the 5 senses that we're in. We may be in a sort of school that allows us to get used to this level of consciousness, and then to become more conscious on a different level would be another level that we move towards in our reincarnation. It's fun to think about. It's exciting if it's possibly true. Perhaps there's a sort of lost Garden of Eden that we once inhabited, a sort of way of living that is different than it is now, that we have greater power and a higher level of consciousness and awareness. But there's really no way for us to truly know. And so the message, I would say, is not to be fearful of bad things happening in the world. One of the interesting things that resonates most with me in the Melchizedek literature is that when these transitions occur, people are chosen by the earth that connect with the sun and the earth. And through that, they sort of create a reality around you where everything seems like it's going crazy all over the world. But around you, everything's working out perfectly. And that is consistently becoming attuned to the sun and to the earth, and moving in towards a meditational state where you actively are trying to work on your consciousness, helping others, opening up your heart chakra, being loving to others. These are things, once you start to have an enhanced ability to create reality, that you want anyway, because you'll create a better reality when you're coming from a place of the heart, not your own personal ego, but from the heart where you're worried about other people and you have love and care unconditionally for all things. When you think in those terms, that pattern of thinking that comes from that fourth chakra is not something unusual or different. It's normal, and it allows you to create a reality that is pretty powerful. And that's why so much emphasis is put on in the third density of going through these lessons. We may not experience it in this incarnation. A lot of people say it only happens in the next incarnation, which is sort of frightening. When you look at the documentary on HBO Max on Heaven's Gate, they're using the same language about a new earth, an expanded consciousness, where they said, hey, these aliens, we can go with the aliens to a higher level, just like the Law of One. And they all killed themselves like a cult. So this is not sort of any suicide idea or anything like that. I'm just discussing the material and information that we have so far, which is really Dolores Cannon, the Mayan information, all the writings about the Mayan information, the Law of One information, Sal Rochelle, Drinvala Melchizedek, Charles Brody Patterson, all of those different comments is what we're really coming to grips with in the New Earth material. I think that that is the important way to look at it. But really, there's no way for you to know if you, on a day-by-day basis, understand that parallel realities can be created, which is one of the final things that Dolores Cannon talks about in her book, 3 Waves of Volunteers, that she understood the New Earth concept in understanding how parallel realities exist. Now, we know that we create parallel realities all the time when we make decisions, and different realities can branch off. But the entire earth becomes its own reality when more and more people focus on a subjective reality, then becomes objectified, becomes a group consensus reality. And we may be moving towards that. And it happens on a day-by-day, moment-by-moment basis. You continue to choose love. You're going to be given opportunities where you have loving moments happen, where there are tests of your love or ways to apply the love, to understand love. And as you continue on the path where you choose to help others, where you are loving to others, you open your heart to others, then you continue to make decisions that pull you into another reality that is entirely like the one described in the New Earth material. When you open up the Christ consciousness within you, as Neville Goddard would say. So really, don't get caught up in a fear-based state about some crazy thing that will happen with the New Earth. I've read this material so you understand where he's coming from. And I do think some of it Melchizedek may believe, but it comes from material that may be false, or as he says, life adjusts and is different, and there may have been adjustments made by outside forces to change what we're going through. There's an implication given in the book that I was reading that if they can pull it off, they can modify so these changes don't happen. And perhaps they did some things to make it so these changes didn't happen. But we are still moving to the New Earth. When I have people ask me, is it too late? It's not too late. It's not going to happen a single day. You, in your own path, continue to be given opportunities to help other people and to choose love. And as you continue to do those things, moving towards a loving reality, then you will move to the New Earth. And either at the end of your life, when you've chosen to help others to a certain level, you will move to that density, or you'll move to it in this density, or whatever. There is a reality that exists because all things are possible. And there is this amazing reality where there's advanced natural technologies that are based on zero-point source-based technology and changes in the way our mind thinks, where we can live in a better body forever in a wonderful existence. I believe that. Is it going to be like it's described by Melchizedek or Dolores Cannon? Dolores Cannon says it's something that happens also right now, that our bodies are being changed and modified. We're going through changes all the time. And so that might be part of it. And all I can say is I'm going to continue to read more information. If stuff starts happening around me, I'm going to stay away from fear. I'm going to start to learn techniques now to overcome my fears, to overcome my thoughts. And as I perfect my ability to think properly and use meditation, then when these changes present themselves, I'll be able to handle them in the proper way. So I continue to go within. The new earth is going to happen for you personally within. By not worrying about what the Galactic Federation is saying or what this channel person is saying about this new thing that's happening. There's a new event happening next week. Don't worry about that stuff. If something happens, you'll be ready for it. Continue to go within. It's not a complicated lesson. It's a simple one. You go within, you let go of the outside world, you start to awaken your energies, because I believe your energy centers are a part of this process. I believe that awakening the energy centers and moving into a Kundalini state, awakening all of the chakras, is a part of moving into this. Going in and making the choices that lead you to the new earth is the path that you're on. So I hope this discussion didn't scare you away or create any fear-based thoughts. There could be things that happen. I don't know. I thought I'd come at this from a different angle so it would help you to understand, because there's obviously a lot of fascination about this. In any case, I'd love to get your opinions on what you believe the new earth will be, and let me know what your opinion is about this. I do get questions about the 144,000. Is that a part of the new earth? One interpretation is that 144,000 people have to go into an enlightened state of consciousness to shift the whole earth. And Neville Goddard says the 144,000 is nothing more than a numeric number to symbolize all of man, and that it's irrelevant. So I don't think I would get caught up in specific biblical interpretations. As we've said, the book of Revelation is really about you awakening, and it's about meditation. And so the new earth that's discussed in the book of Revelation is a new earth for you. It's a new earth that you will enter into personally as you continue to go on this journey where you unveil the loving part of yourself. So I'd love to get your opinions on this. And we will certainly address the new earth from different angles. And so I'll probably put these in a playlist so you can kind of compare some of the different ideas around the new earth. And the best thing I can say is keep an open mind. Don't lock yourself into one interpretation, and continue to go within, working on yourself and working on what you want to do to create, overcome your fears, and learn how to create your reality, and everything will work out for you perfectly. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.